Ketu represents the ascetic energy, which makes one retreat into the forest and wilderness. It is also a big city dweller when working through its materialistic aspect. Sometimes it also makes the philosophically oriented live in a big city just to fulfill their karma or witness the chaos that pervades there. Ketu is even more closely related to the reptilian kingdom than Rahu. Its favorite creatures are all types of lizards, spiders, scorpions, and snakes. All right. Some seers are of the opinion that only Ketu and not Rahu represent snakes. There is also a theory that those under prominent influence of Rahu are in fact afraid of snakes. In my view, both Rahu and Ketu represent snakes, but Ketu has a slight edge as it represents the hood part of snakes. This means that it is a stronger significator of snakebite and poisons than Rahu. So, along with Rahu, it is related to all modern day industries involving poisonous substances. Ketu has a snake hood as its head and represents the act of biting, which has inject which has injecting of poison as its purpose. Thus, it represents all activities like vaccination or giving shots where poison is injected into the body. Ketu is especially related to the vocations involving the use of animal skin. This is especially true when the skins are those of reptiles and sea or aquatic creatures. The leather and fur industry and all the people involved in them can be said to be utilizing Ketu's energy. Among the land mammals, Ketu is closely connected with dogs. This can be seen from the fact that Ketu rules over the sense of smell, and dogs have the strongest sense of smell. According to recent research, dogs can discern and locate diseases in human beings using their sense of smell. Dogs were even used by NASA to find out whether the rocks brought from Mars contained foreign life forms or not. According to one theory, dogs recognize the smell of every living creature on our planet. All the ancient cultures are unanimous about the fact that dogs had the power to see spirits and other creatures of the astral realm. As we know, this astral sensitivity is a Ketu attribute. We'll discuss Ketu's relationship with dogs in detail in chapter 6. Ketu also rules over the strange fishes and creatures residing in the oceans, like octopus, seahorses, starfishes, electric eels, and all the light emanating creatures, bioluminescent. Among insects, Ketu relates specifically to the firefly. Even though Ketu connects with the entire, um, Even though Ketu connects with the entire insect kingdom, cockroaches, which are supposed to be the creatures that can survive any sort of cataclysm, can be categorized as a Ketu creature. Among flying creatures, Ketu has a special affinity with bats. As we know, birds fall under Rahu's domain, but bats are not exactly birds. Bats have a lot of mystery attached to them, and any creature with mystery attached to it will fall under Ketu's domain. The eagle has an esoteric symbol for the higher functionings of the sign Scorpio, has strong connections with Ketu. The eagle is symbolic of Ketu working through the higher principle. It can kill snakes, which in a way represents Ketu's lower functioning. The legendary bird phoenix, which is known by different names in different cultures, is another symbol of Ketu. In legend, it is the bird which tried to reach the sun and got burnt. Like the story of Icarus in Greek mythology, Phoenix is the bird which rises from the ashes of Icarus. It thus signifies the regeneration principle inherent in Ketu, which tells us that there is always a new beginning after an end. Ketu represents all the scavengers and parasites. In the animal kingdom, as such, it relates to hyenas, vultures, fleas, ticks, tapeworms, and all creatures. As mentioned earlier, Ketu has a strong connection with vultures. As the vulture is supposed to be its vehicle, its Vahan. Ketu also signifies all the desert creatures like camels, rodents, and reptiles. In Vedic astrology, a male goat is considered a special significator of Ketu. Vedic wisdom also relates Ketu with Kasturi, a a very strongly scented external organ that some deers possess. Musk deer. It is supposed to have the sweetest smell among the natural fragrances. On the other hand, Ketu represents creatures with a very strong noxious smell, like skunks. Among foods, the Ketu is a special significator of horse gram. Among the cereals, it has a strong connection with rye and barley. A special mixture of seven cereals made in rural India called Satnaja, seven cereals, is considered a special signification of Ketu. It also signifies groundnuts and other foods that grow below the surface. All the foods, including potatoes, yams, radishes, carrots, etc. It is a significator of all oils, natural and synthetic. Among the oils, it has a special affinity with castor oil. Vedic astrology assigns sesame seeds as a special significator of Ketu. Ketu, along with Sun, Mars, and Jupiter, rules over the foods which produce heat in the body, like almonds, cashews, nuts, walnuts, ginger, saffron, etc. Ketu is the significator of the coconut tree and all products made from it. Many of the people living in small islands and coastal areas are completely dependent upon the coconut tree for their survival, thus revealing Ketu's hold over them. Ketu, being the desert planet, rules over all the desert foods like dates. All the tasteless and bland foods, herbs, and drinks fall under Ketu's domain. Among the plant kingdom, Ketu signifies all desert plants like cactus, deep sea plants like seaweed, and plants with earth tones, light brownish colored flowers. It rules over the parasitic plants like ivy. Ketu has an influence over all hallucinogenic plants like hemp, peyote, poppies, mushrooms, etc. All types of funguses fall under Ketu's domain. Ketu rules over all strange and exotic plants like the pandanus tree. Ketu is said to have a special affinity with kusha, a type of grass. Among clothes, Ketu represents all dirty and worn out clothes. Ketu is a special significator of clothes with holes in them. Okay. These days, such clothes are intentionally made in a fashion statement. Ketu also represents clothing with its colors, which are described in the earlier section dealing with Ketu's appearance. Ketu is more strongly related to clothes worn above the waist as opposed to Rahu, which governs clothes worn below the waist. Ketu relates to all types of waistbands. Ketu represents all types of ascetic robes and saffron colored clothing, which is symbolic of renunciation. On the other hand, Ketu represents all types of eccentric and multicolored clothing. Clothes with stripes and checks are special Ketu significations. In fact, they are said to allow Ketu to see. Ketu, as we know, is just a tail with a serpent's head and can thus be considered blind. Ketu, being the planet ruling over animal skins, represents all types of leathers and fur clothing. Among ornaments, Ketu rules nose rings and earrings. Piercings of ears and nose is a process closely related to Ketu. Ketu's functioning in a chart can be judged by seeing if the above mentioned processes are smooth or given rise to complications like infections. We shall discuss more further in chapter 15. Ketu relates to all ornaments made from the metals and gemstones it rules over. It primarily rules over iron and all the alloys made from it. It is a special significator of special types of alloys made by combining eight different types of metals known as Ashtadhatu, eight metals. According to Vedic astrology, all rings and totems made for propitiating Ketu are supposed to be made from this alloy. Among the gemstones, cat's eye is chrysoberyl is most closely related to Ketu. Turquoise, lapis lazuli, and tiger's eye are also categorized as Ketu gemstones. Turquoise is a gemstone that was extensively used by all the ancient cultures, which strongly related it with the occult. Lapis lazuli is known to keep one free from influence of negative astral entities like spirits. Ketu is a tribal planet and thus represents all surviving indigenous tribal cultures and peoples, including the Native American Indians and Australian Aborigines. In fact, Ketu represents all the so called primitive cultures and people. This is a classic case which brings out the conflicting sides of the nodes. Rahu represents the modern culture and civilizations with materialistic expansion as their main motive, while Ketu represents ancient and primitive cultures focused on spiritualistic living in harmony with nature. Ketu is the planet symbolizing innocence and thus rules over children, only up till the age they lose their innocence, which varies from individual to individual. Ketu represents old people, usually above the age of 69. Among family relations, Ketu represents the maternal grandfather and the maternal grandfather and the paternal grandmother. It also has it is also the significator of the mother's ancestral family. As we can see, Ketu completes the ancestral picture along with Rahu. The implications of this are discussed in the genetics and reincarnation chapter. Okay. According to the dictums of Lal Kitab, Ketu also represents male progeny. I have seen this dictum to work perfectly in a number of charts. A strong Ketu is a precondition of having a worthwhile male progeny, which one can derive pleasure from, whatever that means. Um, Ketu represents all homeless, destitute, dispossessed, down and out members of society. Like Rahu, Vedic astrology assigns the mlecha, outcast status to Ketu. In the snobbishly puritanical medieval times, it represents foreigners and outcasts. The term an outlaw or misfit in society. No, foreigners. The term outcast in modern times can be translated into one having no money, an outlaw, or a misfit in society. It also represents amputees, especially related to people with one or more hands missing. All right, that's as per Vedic astrology. Ketu, along with Rahu, is the significator of all types of bad company. Ketu is the planet representing sudden gain or loss. All the extreme events like paupers becoming kings and kings becoming paupers can be ascribed to Ketu. One must remember that Saturn can also give that Saturn also can give the same result, but with Ketu, such events happen very quickly, while Saturn they happen slowly over a period of time. Just as Rahu signifies our exploration of the deep space, Ketu signifies our exploration of the subatomic realm. Ketu is thus the significator of the quantum physics. With all its probabilities and uncertainties, it is no surprise that all known physical laws are dissolved when dealing with the realm of the infinitely small chaos. Organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Ketu also has a deep relationship with biology, especially in the area of genetics. Ketu can be seen as the carbon atom, which is the basic building block of all organic life. Thus, it is related to organic chemistry and all its offshoots, like the carbon fiber, fiberglass, and plastic industries. Among the planets, Ketu is the sole significator of the whole microorganisms. Microorganisms are the most primitive forms of life. In fact, they are the first in the evolutionary chain of the emergence of life. Ketu, as we know, is a planet of beginnings. Ketu rules over all oceanic microorganisms like blue, green algae, etc. Ketu, as we will find out later, is the co ruler of the sign representing the ocean, Pisces. Recently, there has been a lot of research on how the seas, algae, are an excellent food for humans and can solve the world's food problems. I doubt that, but one can say that Ketu's energies are involved in propagating these studies. Okay, there's a lot. Hmm. Okay. We can see Ketu represents all small creatures in tune with its contracting nature, while Rahu represents big creatures like elephants, the biggest land mammal in the present, in tune with its expansive nature. In the microorganisms category, we find the organisms responsible for most of the present day diseases, viruses, and bacteria. Viruses, as we know, have baffled biologists for long as they show both living and non living characteristics. In fact, they can be said to be on the borderline between living and non living. This doesn't surprise us astrologers, as anything to do with Ketu has to have a bit of mystery. It follows that Ketu represents most of the viral and bacterial infections. Such diseases are so numerous that it is not possible to list them here. We can say that most of the diseases which are infectious are related to either Rahu or Ketu. Ketu is usually the cause behind mass epidemics like cholera, which was now what was it? Corona, corona, yes, corona. Epidemics like cholera, which was appropriately named Black Death after it decimated a quarter of Europe's population in the 15th century. Any disease which assumes epidemic proportions has Ketu working behind the scenes. AIDS is one such present day disease, which is very much a Ketu signification. Ketu is also behind many of the disorders. Okay. Ketu is also behind many of the disorders arising from an imbalance of the pitta, heat element in the body. Wounds, fevers, cuts, rashes, boils, indigestion, and inflammatory conditions can be attributed to Ketu along with Sun and Mars. Since Ketu is the significator of worms and conditions like intestinal parasites are also Ketu significations. Ketu, as discussed earlier, is the significator of fungi and all types of fungal infections and diseases caused by fungus poisoning are related to Ketu. Ergot, a fungus which mainly affects Ketu cereals, uh, rye and barley, is full of poisonous and hallucinogenic chemicals. The famous drug of the 60s, LSD, is derived from this fungus. Recent research has shown that it was the cause behind the sudden epidemics, which involved hallucinatory states followed by death, recording in certain regions in Europe and America over the last 500 years. The famous Salem witch trials in a small township of Salem in America, in which hundreds of innocent women were executed on the charge of practicing witchcraft, was a direct result of one such epidemic. Obviously, the residents didn't know that it was the fungus and not witchcraft which was causing the epidemic. It is interesting to note that both of them are Ketu significations, and so is slaughter of innocent people. Ketu has the significator of sense of smell, directly relates to a highly developed or completely absent sense of smell. Since the dog is a special signification of Ketu, it follows that dog bite is also an event falling in Ketu's domain. Rabies, an incurable disease that can result through dog bite, also becomes Ketu signification. The ancients saw Ketu as the planet signifying all hidden treasures. It is generally seen that snakes accompany any treasure buried in the earth. Dragons are another close related thing to snakes. Ketu thus represents all the treasure hunters of the past and present. In the present times, Ketu signifies all Ketu signifies the search for petroleum, minerals, metals, and other such modern day treasures. Ketu also represents the persons involved in searching for underground water in dry landscapes. Ketu, being related with the core of everything, relates to the sciences, trying to understand the core of the earth. It signifies all people involved in sciences like geology and anthropology. To sum it all up, Ketu is related to all types of underground research and exploration. Rahu, on the other hand, is more involved with atmospheric and space studies and exploration. Ketu is the planet ruling the past and thus represents the people and vocations involved with the past in some way. Historians, antique dealers, archaeologists, art restorers, etc., can be said to be under strong Ketu influence. Institutions dealing with the past, such as museums, are also Ketu significations. Ketu has a strong connection with the law and lawyers. If it is sharing its influence with the sixth house of Mars, it has strong fascination of getting to the truth of any matter. It is also the planet which Vedic astrology describes as one causing harm to enemies, which is what litigation is all about in majority of the cases. Ketu, as we know, likes to deal with events that have already happened, past events. Thus, it is a strong influence over people in normal criminals solving professions like detectives, forensic experts, etc. Rahu, as mentioned earlier, rules over secret service institutions. Ketu is the planet which is more interested in uncovering the secrets of these institutions. Ketu is thus more of a spy planet. Consequently, it represents all institutions and persons involved in such activities. Hmm, there's a lot. The Rahu Ketu experience by Prash Trivedi.